today at the Morgan. Here live. Charles Van Morgan reporting live after murder at the Tennessee Department of Corrections. We're live on the scene. Breaking news. We're going to talk about the policy decisions that have contributed to this horrific murder of murder by an inmate of a corrections officer. We have talked to several anonymous about this issue. And facility, the staffing major below the staff that they need to maintain their own safety, and also they have a 37% turnover rate. We wonder why the governor is not on the scene of one of his officers that works for him that protects society. He should be here. We're going to talk about the policy issues. So late last night around midnight, Correctional Complex here in Morgan County, Tennessee, Wartburg, Tennessee. Staying live. Immediate emergency response was attempted. The officer succumbed to his injury. State investigator reviewing the circumstances. The identity of the inmate that murdered the officer, stabbed him numerous times, has not been released. The corrections officer that was murdered is Dustin Pedigo, and his family is requesting prayer. So please pray for Dustin Pedigo's family. He was stabbed multiple times late Tuesday night at the Morgan County Correctional Complex. We've got some inside information from present and former corrections officers that work at this institute. We're going to break down to you what happened and the culprit of the problem. Thank you. Come on board. Charles Van Morgan reporting live news. The death of a corrections officer murdered at the Morgan County Correctional Complex here in Wartburg, Tennessee. And we're going to break down the policy decisions that have caused this, the inside information that we have from corrections officers that we have spoke to, some of them present, some of them former, anonymously, and the staffing problems that have contributed to this by the governor's policy decisions, and that needs to change. And why the governor is not here, he should be. One of his officers at Protecting Society has been brutally murdered at a Tennessee correctional facility. We're here live on the scene. As you can see, Tennessee Department of Corrections, Morgan County Correctional Complex, a corrections officer, Dustin Pedigo, 41 years old, was brutally murdered, stabbed numerous times, and emergency and medical were not able to keep him alive. He died Wednesday, today, sometime this morning. Around the incident happened around midnight yesterday. We talked to several corrections, present and former corrections officers, and they say, as you can see the icon, that they're not treated like humans. We're not talking about the inmates not treated like humans. We're talking about the corrections officers. We talked to them, and they say that the corrections officers here at the Morgan County Complex, talked to some that work here anonymously, are not treated like humans. Now, it's one thing to say that the inmates aren't treated like humans, but we have reports of present officers at the Morgan County Correctional Complex and former officers who have left that say the officers are not treated like humans. So here you have, we're on the scene of a death of Dustin Pedigo, 41 years old, brutally stabbed to death, that was probably not treated like a human, according to reports that we have, verified reports from honest, reliable sources that wish to remain anonymously, that they work here at this Tennessee Department of Safety, Morgan County Correctional Complex, and they're not even treated like human. And one of them was murdered last night due to policy decisions made by our people in government office. They have a 30% staffing shortage, so these officers are required to work without the proper assistance, and they don't have the backup they need to work alone a lot because they're not fully staffed. They're not treated like humans, and that's a policy decision. I have, in fact, know firsthand about corrections. I started my corrections career at the Law Enforcement Training Academy in Corpus Christi, Texas. One of the most dangerous prisons, one of the most dangerous jails in the state of Tennessee. In 1989, you can see May 1989, Law Enforcement Training School, certificate of attendance, Nueces County Sheriff's Training Academy at the Nueces County Jail in Corpus Christi, Texas. So I have knowledge of corrections, and one of the main things about corrections is the training. The training, and you have to be safe, and you have to be trained right. So Dustin Pedigo, 41 years old, brutally stabbed by an inmate at the Morgan County Correctional Complex in Wartburg, Tennessee. Reports from corrections officers, present and former, say that the corrections officers are not treated like humans. They're way understaffed, they're forced to work overtime, and they're not treated like humans. So this is a corrections officer, and I wonder if he was on an overtime assignment, forced to work overtime without backup, because they are understaffed 30%. And this is a policy decision by the governor. So the family of Mr. Dustin Pedigo has asked for prayer. State investigators are reviewing the circumstances, and they'll also always say that the state is not involved. There's nothing they can do. The identity of the inmate has not been released, and the facility is reporting, and this is important, that's what they're reporting, the facility is reporting that it's secure, no ongoing public threat that they won't want to tell us about at the time. And what we don't know is how the weapon was obtained, security classification of the inmate, and staffing levels at this particular facility. We do know that staffing overall at prisons in the state of Tennessee is 30% below what it should be. And whether prior warnings of threats existed from this inmate. The last corrections officer that was killed was Wayne Cotton Morgan. He was shot and killed, not at a correctional facility, at the Warren County Courthouse was the last inmate that was the last corrections officer that was killed. So here you have it, the Tennessee Department of Corrections, Morgan County Complex. A corrections officer dead, and we're reporting live on the scene. The bigger issue is prison staffing levels, officer to inmate ratios, training standards, and contraband control procedures, administrative oversight. I do know that they had a incident in about 2019 where an inmate escaped, and the Tennessee Department of Corrections fired 5 officers involving one inmate. Some of them have reported to me that they did nothing wrong. The reason they were terminated was because they didn't know anybody, didn't have any family or friends that worked for the Tennessee Department of Safety, the Tennessee Department of Corrections, TDOT. So if you're related to somebody, then you're allowed to do whatever you want to do, and you'll keep your job in spite of malfeasance or negligence. And if you're not related to somebody in power in the Tennessee Department of Corrections, you have to work overtime. You're not treated like human. You don't have the proper staffing levels, the proper backup, and you could get fatally stabbed to death, and the governor doesn't care enough to come to the scene and talk about what happened. And they're not giving us out any information. We don't know the identity of the inmate or any of the circumstances other than Dustin Pedigo, 41 years old, was murdered at their correctional institute at the Morgan County Correctional Institute. The Tennessee Department of Corrections, Morgan County Correctional Complex. We're live on the scene. We're live on the scene, reporting live. Like, share, comment. So we have had a total of 240 assaults reported in 2025 at the Tennessee Department of Safety prisons, state of Tennessee. About 240 total assaults. up 22.6% since 2023, where there was 196 total assaults. And we have had 2 murders, inmate murdering inmates, in 2023. The public records are not available for 2025, but we had 2 murders of inmates in 2023. So these Tennessee Department of Corrections, Morgan County Correctional Complex, these state prisons are places of mass violence. And now, just yesterday, right before midnight, a 41-year-old inmate, a 41-year-old corrections officer serving the public, serving the state, was murdered brutally, stabbed numerous times by, as of yet, unidentified inmate, and has been taken to the hospital and succumbed to his injuries, multiple stab wounds. Brutal murder. We know from facts, from witnesses that have told us, not witnesses to the crime, but witnesses that work at the facility, how the facility is run. According to people that work here currently, they want to speak anonymously, they are not treated like humans. And we're not talking about the inmates, we're talking about corrections officers that risk their lives to serve you, the public. They're not treated by humans, but like humans by the people in the state power and state government. Now, let alone the inmates. Now, it would be very easily to say the inmates weren't treated like humans, and people wouldn't agree with that, but they would understand that that might be the case. But we're reporting live on the scene, breaking news, that not only the inmates not treated like humans, that's not what we're reporting on. We're reporting on the corrections officers, the people that work here, that serve society, that work for the governor, have reported to me they're not treated like human beings. They have to work overtime, mandatory overtime, and they'll get wrote up for insubordination. This is people that work here now, anonymous sources. And they're way understaffed. They don't have the protection that they need, the backup. They should be going 2 to 3 officers on a routine patrol check of the facility. Instead, they're having to go by themselves. And I have training. I started my career in law enforcement in 1989 at a correctional institute and in Corpus Christi, Texas, one of the most dangerous jails in the United States of America, and survived. I know how dangerous it is. I'm reporting this from firsthand knowledge, boots on the ground, working in a jail where it's very dangerous. I know how this stuff goes down. One of the problems is lack of training. One of the problems is lack of proper backup, and you're outnumbered and back up by the facility. And the inmates know that the prison officials have your back, and they don't. I know for a fact that about 5 officers were fired in about 2019 as a result of the Department of Corrections terminating their position because an inmate escaped but then come back. So they fired 5 officers without any evidence of all 5 of them doing anything wrong, without any evidence at all, because they wanted to show the public that they're doing a fine job in firing people when an inmate escapes, where they didn't get the real culprits of the inmate escape. All 5 corrections officers were not at fault, but they're sending a message: we'll treat you like nothing, we'll treat you like you're not human, make you work understaffed, make you work overtime, and if a mistake is made, we'll blame you when you didn't do anything. This is a Tennessee Department of Corrections facility. That's how it's run. We just have a murder today, a brutal murder, a inmate stabbing a corrections officer, dedicated corrections officer, 41 years old, multiple times stabbed by an inmate. We have a murder at the jail now. Understaffing, mandatory overtime, not treated like humans, and now they're allowing inmates to murder them. The governor is allowing that. He's over this facility. Does the buck stop with him, or is he still campaigning in churches? So here we are, Charles Van Morgan. Like, share, and comment. The Morgan County Correctional Facility. And let's see if we have covered all our notes. Thank y'all for joining me. I don't want to get any closer to the facility. Could get arrested. And like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. So Charles Van Morgan reporting live on the scene and at the Morgan County Correctional Facility here in Morgan County, Tennessee. The bigger issues: prison staffing levels, officer to inmate ratios, training standards, contraband procedures, administrative oversight. We just had an officer brutally murdered here, stabbed to death. How horrific. Now the wind's blowing. The human cost, 41-year-old public servant, family impacted, fellow officers affected at this Morgan County Correctional Facility. We're broadcasting live and in person. And thank y'all for coming. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Breaking news at the Morgan County Morgan County Correctional Complex in Morgan County, Tennessee. Dustin Pedigo murdered. The complex, according to witnesses, has low staffing, 35% understaffed all across the state of Tennessee. They work without backup. They have mandatory overtime, and they're not treated like human. And now one of them is murdered under the current policy decisions of the governor and the people in power in the state of Tennessee. That's the story. They're going to switch the story and praise the officer that died and focus on that, and that's fine. That's exactly right. Honorable person. But why did he have to die? Why did he have to shed his blood for the protection of Tennesseans? Because the government in the state of Tennessee did not protect him. I have corrections, training, and experience. I know what I'm talking about. In order to run a safe facility, you have to have officers that are well staffed, well rested, treated with backup from the administration, not fired wrongly, not stuff made up on them. And so we have now an officer dead. A funeral that people go to, but the governor won't go to that funeral. He doesn't like that stuff. He likes to go at groundbreaking ceremonies where he opens up groundbreaking ceremonies for corporations where he gives corporate welfare. But somebody that provides for safety, health, protection, and well-being of our citizenry here in the state of Tennessee, I wonder if you'll see him there. He might be there now that I have said something about it. And I know from inside information, from inside reporting, from talking to corrections officers, that they are not treated like human. That's not talking about the inmates. You would think that's the inmates. That's why I put that on there. No, I'm talking about the corrections officers not treated like human. And now, and we're talking about they're not treated like human by the High Bills Lee administration and the people in government and the administration of the Tennessee Department of Corrections Morgan County Complex facility. Talking to people that work here, they're not treated like humans by the administration, put in a dangerous situation. And they have mandatory overtime, or they're written up for insubordination. They're terminated by the droves, and contributes to the lack of staffing for things that they didn't even do. 5 of them fired all at one time for an inmate escaping and coming back, and not all 5 of them were guilty of doing any wrongdoing. So they send a message: we'll do whatever we want to do. So they're not treated like human, mandatory overtime, written up for insubordination if they don't. They have to work understaffed where they don't have backup. And now, because of the and wickedness of people in Tennessee state power, one of them was brutally stabbed to death numerous times by an inmate at the Morgan County Correctional Facility. None of the other channels will say the real culprit of that. I've talked to people that work here or have worked here. Several of them got fired because they work here in the corrupt administration. They did nothing wrong. One of them that works here now says they're not treated like human, and now one of them murdered. Is this going to continue? Going forward, we need to protect our corrections officers, and we need to provide them backup. We need to have respect for our corrections officers, provide them the necessary equipment and training that they need. I remember when I was in corrections, they told us never let anyone walk behind you, never let an inmate walk behind you. Now in our political world, where inmates are treated like humans sometimes, and corrections officers, people in government that actually do the job, are treated like they're nothing, I wonder if they give them that kind of training. I was always taught never let an inmate walk behind you. always take safety measures. A corrections officer should never go into an inmate cell by themselves. It ought to be numerous. It ought to come in droves. It ought to be overwhelming force to show these people it's going to be useless. You're not going to be able to hurt one of us. You're going to be the one that suffers the consequences of your violence. You're in jail, in prison, for the most part, for a reason. So we have Dustin Pedigo, 41 years old, reporting live at the Morgan County Correctional Complex here in Wartburg, Tennessee, murdered last night as a result of malfeasance, policy decisions by the government that they failed to protect him. Talk to witnesses. Thank y'all for coming. This is Charles Van Morgan live reporting from Morgan County Correctional Facility. And thank y'all so very much. That's Wares Valley. That's not Wares Valley. This is Wartburg, Tennessee, in Morgan County, Tennessee. And the other news media is right up near the building, but they won't let us go right up near the building. And they're right up near the building because they'll lie, other news media, they'll lie for the governor and the governor's administration, the people in power. The real news, Charles Van Morgan, unbridled news, is out here on the street filming right outside the facility because I'll tell the truth for you, the mass populace, and I won't lie for this facility and the administration of this complex. I know people that work here, they don't treat them like human. They work them overtime, mandatory, or insubordination. They don't provide them backup. The staffing levels are 30% low at facilities all across the state of Tennessee. It's policy decisions. They fired them without reason by 5 at one time for something they didn't even do without any due process of law substantially. If they take it before administrative law judges, they were wrongly fired, 5 of them at one time, wrongly, because one inmate escaped due to the negligence of just one corrections officer, maybe 2, not 5. Then administrative law judges are in the governor's pocket. This system in Tennessee is corrupt. We're standing outside a solemn scene, and thank you, Pedigo's family, and we will pray for you. The corruptness of Tennessee government, and they're standing over bodies, and they'll tell you it was all the inmates' fault. The inmates should have never had the opportunity to kill a corrections officer in the state of Tennessee. We need a change of regime, a change of government. The Democrats and Republicans, neither one will say the things I'm saying because they're in with the politicity. I'm not. I don't want to be in with corruption. I stand with more people than what they got, the mass populace of Tennesseans. An inmate killed, Morgan County Correctional Facility here in Wartburg, Tennessee. Thank you all for watching, and we appreciate the views. Let's see, let's turn down. Morgan County Correctional. As more details become available, a corrections officer brutally stabbed to death. Corrections officers say they're not treated like human. Fired without reason. 5 of them. Work understaffed. And they are not treated like human, work understaffed, mandatory overtime and getting written up for subordination. Now one of them is brutally stabbed to death. As we get more information, we'll report it to you. Dustin Pedigo, 41 years old, murdered at the Morgan County Correctional Facility due to malfeasance and policy decisions by the state of Tennessee. Thank y'all for coming. If we get any updates, we'll post them immediately. This is Charles Van Morgan, Unbridled News, boots on the ground, live on the scene. Thank you all very much.